Trigger warning. This podcast is about grief. Whether you are newly bereaved or whether you have been stuck in grief for years, I do hope this podcast brings you some comfort. Grief is such a universal experience, but we all do it differently. This podcast is not about fixing you or forcing the healing process because there is no cure for grief. It can only be experienced, absorbed, loved and cared for. So whether you are doing it privately behind closed doors or like me, you are kicking and screaming your way through, let's support each other. My name is Louise Bates, and my hope is that this podcast shines a light on your path and gives you the strength to navigate your way through the grieving process. I'm sending you so much love and support, and I look forward to sharing this journey with you. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Gift for Grief, a space where we talk about love, loss and explore the unexpected gifts that grief can bring. Today I'm talking about something most grievers have heard about, maybe in a textbook or a therapist's office, or in a well-meaning conversation with a friend trying to help, and that is the 5 stages of grief. The first stage is denial, then anger, followed by bargaining, and then depression, and last but not least, acceptance. These 5 stages come from the work of American psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and they were first introduced in 1969 in her book On Death and Dying. But here's something that often gets lost with this list. These stages were originally observed in people who were facing their own terminal illness, not necessarily in people going through grief. Over time, though, this list has been adopted to help describe the emotional journey of grief. And while many of us do pass through these 5 stages, or at least touch them, grief is rarely that neat. Do these 5 stages resonate with you? Because they certainly don't fit my experience of grief. Anticipatory grief was my first stage. That's the type of grief you experience when a loved one has been diagnosed with a life-limiting or terminal illness. With anticipatory grief, we get to watch our loved ones decline over a period of time and then their eventual death. Weirdly, some people seem to think this is a kind of blessing because we get time to say goodbye. I certainly wouldn't call it a blessing. When my son Matthew was diagnosed with cancer, I remember the hopelessness and the helplessness because I couldn't do a thing about it, and my anxiety was on another level. The memories of his illness and his treatments and watching my son slowly disappear over time still haunt me. And what about the brutal stage? I remember it well. My son Matthew had died in the hospice on the Friday afternoon at 3:05. And even though we knew he was dying, I wasn't ready. How could you ever be ready to watch your child take their last breath? When Matthew died, my world fell apart, and the pain inside was like no other pain. It felt like a silent scream that couldn't get out. Those first few hours were incredibly brutal. This was my second stage of grief. I'd hardly slept for 2 years since his cancer diagnosis, and the weeks leading up to his death, I was literally running on adrenaline, because I needed to spend every moment with my son, and sleep was just not on the cards. But that night, I slept like a baby. When I woke up the next day, it felt weird. There was nothing to do. Bill had done all the phone calls and visits to let everyone close to us know that he'd died. And it felt like the world had stopped. I felt numb, and I questioned myself. Why did I not feel anything? Did I do all my grieving yesterday and get it out of the way? Did I not love Matthew enough? Was there something wrong with me? Why was I not falling apart? Little did I know that the numbness was actually a survival mechanism. It protected me from feeling anything. I was disconnected to my emotions because it would have been too overwhelming. Numbness was my third stage of grief. I'm not sure how long the numbness phase lasted, but chinks of pain broke through in small doses. Then my body would shut itself down again, and I existed in this weird vortex of disbelief while my mind went into overdrive. The whys and the what-ifs started digging up all sorts of questions, and I started believing we'd missed something or not done enough. My mind was trying to make sense of something that just didn't make sense. Disbelief was my fourth stage. Organising the funeral took my attention, but the brutality of grief, the numbness and the disbelief was never far away. After the funeral, life became a cocktail of so many different emotions, but anger was always missing. I realised much later on in my journey that I had gone through the anger stage before Matthew died. And then I discovered the 5 stages of grief, and it made me think I was doing it all wrong. The first stage, denial, then anger, followed by bargaining, then depression, and last but not least, acceptance. I wasn't following the rules. I did denial when Matthew was first diagnosed, and many other times on various hospital appointments after then. Anger. I did that over a 2-year period, watching Matthew go through hell, watching him go through the best and the worst of our National Health Service. Don't get me started on that one. Bargaining. I tried to do deals while Matthew was on his deathbed with the universe, the angels, and then I went to the top guy. I begged him to take me instead. Maybe I left it too late. Depression. Apparently, I needed to go through this to get to acceptance. Oh joy, something to look forward to. Who doesn't love a bit of soul-crushing despair with their morning coffee? And then, drum roll please, comes acceptance. Just like that. Boom, all better. Over it. What a load of crap. Avoid any therapists who claim their 5-step or 12-step programs will transform you. And if anyone tries to help you by referring to the 5 stages of grief, make your excuses and get out of there fast. It's important to remember that the 5 stages of grief were originally observed in people who were facing their own terminal illness, not people going through grief. It still amazes me that some grief specialists continue to use this model. There are various models to help us understand loss, but one I find the most helpful is the idea that we grow around our grief. With this model, there are no set stages or phases. Instead, your grief remains the same, but you grow around it. As I grew around my grief, I could feel it change in me. Grief does change you. I believe this is where we can get stuck, because we try to fight that change. We think that remaining the same is the right thing to do, but we need to be flexible. In order to process and move forward, we need to allow this change to happen. And how we process our grief experience determines how we do that. But we do need to put the work in. When it comes to the 5 stages of grief, they're often still mentioned in conversations about loss. But in reality, grief is so much more complex. Rather than following a straightforward step-by-step progression, grief often feels unpredictable and non-linear, more like navigating a maze than moving through defined stages. There are no strict rules. Grief isn't one size fits all. It changes, it ebbs and flows. Just when you think you're having a good moment or a good day, a wave of guilt or sadness can suddenly appear, and that's completely normal. My advice as a therapist and a bereaved mother is, just notice how you are, from one moment to another, from one day to the next, because grief needs to be felt. It needs to be experienced, it needs to be nurtured, and it needs to be loved. Grief is love in a different form. It's that connection to your loved one. And at first, it is overwhelming, and you may experience the numbness. But speak to your body. Say, "Welcome to my body, you can stay as long as you like." Invite it in. Treat it like a small child and love it, because feeling is healing. Don't try to push it down or suppress your feelings. They need to be acknowledged. I found controlled grief surprisingly helpful, but let's be honest, that's probably because I'm a total control freak. Controlled grief really worked for me. I didn't want my elderly mum or my siblings to see me fall apart, mostly because I knew they were also grieving and someone had to hold it together. So I kept my meltdowns private like a classy emotional ninja. Basically, controlled grief is when you book an appointment with your emotions. You sit with them, cry it out, scream into a pillow, punch a cushion or two, all very dignified of course. But outside those grief o'clock sessions, you try to stay present and aware instead of pushing it down and suppressing it. Key thing, don't shove it all down and hope it disappears. Grief doesn't like being ignored. It'll just pop back up in the biscuit aisle when you least expect it. It's been nearly 9 years since my son died, and I've come to understand that this isn't something I'll ever truly get over. And I'm not sure that's even the right goal. What does it really mean to get over such a profound loss? Because it will always be sad that my son is dead. Over time, I've made peace with my grief. In many ways, grief feels like an old friend. We come as a pair. It's familiar, it's present, and something I've learned to live with. And yet, I still have moments of disbelief. Nearly 9 years on, and I still find myself asking sometimes, how did this happen to our family? This is my new normal, and even when the waves feel overwhelming, which they still do occasionally, I now trust that I'll make it through to the other side. I share my experience with the hope that it might support others who are going through something similar. I know there are people listening who need to hear that there is life after loss. It's different, of course, and the journey takes as long as it takes. I'm still finding my way. I'm still a work in progress. But through my writing, my books, my blog, and this podcast, I've found something meaningful. It brings me a sense of purpose and connection. It also keeps Matthew's memory alive, and it's like therapy for me. I hope that by offering these reflections, I can also help others feel a little less alone. So, when you see the 5 stages of grief, remember they were never meant for the grieving. I hope that what I've shared in this episode has offered you some insight or comfort, and perhaps loosened your grief slightly. Wherever you are in your journey, know that you are not alone and you will find your way through in your own time. If this episode spoke to you, please consider sharing it with someone who's grieving. It might just be the small light they need right now. I'm Louise Bates, therapist, author, and your podcast host. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and remember, feeling is healing. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Gift for Grief. If you found it comforting, please consider subscribing to my podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Please also leave a review because it helps others to find the show. Together we can help each other become more grief literate. To learn more about my personal journey and my 2 books on grief, visit www.louisebates.co.uk. The music on this podcast was written and recorded by my son Matthew Bates and can be found on his 2 albums, Fight Back and Kaleidoscope. And finally, if you're struggling with grief or concerned about your mental health, please reach out to your doctor. You don't have to go through this alone. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and thank you for listening.